and more than £100 million extra on asylum accommodation bills because their policies are pushing up the use of hotels and the increase in delays. Can she confirm that the Nationalities Borders Bill and changes to immigration rules have in fact added further bureaucracy and delays, leading to tens of thousands more people waiting in asylum accommodation, with hundreds of additional specialist officers to work with Europol and others to crack down on the gangs, as well as the urgent work needed with France to get a proper agreement in place? There's also been a total failure to prevent a huge proliferation of gangs in the Channel. Why has the Home Secretary refused our calls for a major new National Crime Agency unit?
Did the government deliberately withhold crucial information about the Southport attack? That's the explosive claim at the heart of today's parliamentary showdown. Yvette Cooper's relentless questioning has opened a can of worms that threatens to engulf the entire government. But how deep does this cover-up really go? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Tension was in the air when Yvette Cooper entered the legislative arena. She was prepared to force her way into the government's heavily secured vault of secrets about the Southport attack, armed with a list of unresolved questions. The House of Commons was about to be rocked by the Shadow Home Secretary's unrelenting quest for the truth.
And I echo the Home Secretary's tribute to the emergency services and Border Force staff who responded. But I must ask her, can she tell me whether counter-terror police and counter-extremism units are involved in the investigation? The bomb attack on the Western Jet Foil Centre was truly appalling. I'm sure the whole House will condemn it in the strongest possible terms. 1,600 people, with some families there for weeks. Conditions that have been described as inhumane, with risks of fire, disorder and infection. There are confirmed diphtheria outbreaks. It doesn't make sense for them not to be. Why are they not? Turning to the dreadful conditions at Manston, 4,000 people are now on a site designed to accommodate.
Cooper did not hesitate to go on the attack. Mr. Speaker, she said in a firm, resolute voice, the public should know why important details on the Southport attack have been kept secret. What does the administration hope to conceal? With everyone's attention on the opposing benches, the room went silent. The government's wall of silence started to show fractures as Cooper's interrogation grew more intense. She focused on the Prime Minister's familiarity with Axel Rabana's past, exposing a shocking detail that had been concealed from the public. Can the Home Secretary explain why the Prime Minister failed to disclose that Axel Rabana had been referred to the Prevent program not once, but multiple times? Uncomfortably, the government benches moved, and their quiet spoke more than words could. Cooper, meanwhile, was only getting warmed up. In a dramatic turn, she revealed a startling revelation that caused the room to erupt in whispers. Mr. Speaker, according to the evidence I have, Axel Rabana was discovered in possession of an Al-Qaeda manual and rising. However, the public was never given access to this crucial information. Why? The consequences of the news weighed heavily on the air. By taking a deliberate approach, the Shadow Home Secretary was constructing a strong case against the way the government handled the Southport incident. She continued, wondering why such important knowledge was being kept secret. Does the Home Secretary not agree that by keeping these facts from the public, the government has potentially fueled dangerous misinformation and conspiracy theories? Cooper's incessant interrogation made it very evident that the government's policy of remaining silent was failing miserably. Every unresolved query just increased mistrust and fueled conjecture about what else might be concealed beneath the official storyline. Sensing blood in the water, the opposition benches became increasingly active. As Cooper methodically destroyed the government's defense, her colleagues nodded in agreement. Cooper played the part of a resolute investigator, solving a challenging case in this masterclass in parliamentary examination.
To address those immediate public health crises and also the issues for untrained staff. Behind these are deeper failures in the government's policies on asylum and channel crossings, reports of scabies and MRSA outbreaks, also reports of outbreaks of violence and untrained staff. She said nothing about what she was doing. 96% of the small boat arrivals last year have still not had a decision, and initial decisions alone are taking more than 400 days On this Conservative government's watch, decision-making has collapsed. The Home Office took just 14,000 initial asylum decisions in the last 12 months, compared to 28,000 6 years ago.
In addition to keeping the public in the dark about the Southport attack, the government's silence may have unintentionally ignited a civil unrest fire. Cooper vividly depicted the perilous hole left by the absence of official information as she persisted in her incessant interrogation. However, this was about the very real repercussions of being silent, not merely about informing others. Cooper didn't mince words when she described how a poisonous mixture of false information swiftly filled this knowledge void. The worst part is that some of this misinformation may have been spread by adversarial foreign entities. It's similar to asking why the neighborhood cats have taken over your living room when you've left your front door open. The Shadow Home Secretary, however, was not finished. She made a clear connection between the riots that broke out after the incident and the propagation of these false tales. Isn't that a terrifying thought? Perhaps the spark that ignited the fuse of anarchy was the very stillness intended to preserve order. These charges weren't thrown around carelessly by Cooper. Citing terrorism expert Jonathan Hall's cautions about the perils of information gaps, she arrived ready with expert opinion. It's like attempting to negotiate a minefield while wearing a blindfold. Eventually, something will go off. Cooper's criticism of the government's decision to brush off early worries as fake news was possibly the most devastating. This phrase has been used a lot lately, but it assumes a completely new level of irresponsibility in this situation.
And more than £100 million extra on asylum accommodation bills because their policies are pushing up the use of hotels and the increase in delays. Can she confirm that the Nationalities Borders Bill and changes to immigration rules have in fact added further bureaucracy and delays, leading to tens of thousands more people waiting in asylum accommodation, with hundreds of additional specialist officers to work with Europol and others to crack down on the gangs, as well as the urgent work needed with France to get a proper agreement in place? There's also been a total failure to prevent a huge proliferation of gangs in the Channel. Why has the Home Secretary refused our calls for a major new National Crime Agency unit?
After all, who is left to tell us what is true when the government screams fake news? Cooper contended that this dismissal contributed to public unrest. It is easy to understand why. Is it any surprise that people begin to lose faith in those who are meant to guide them when their legitimate worries are dismissed as absurd? Cooper, however, wasn't only there to assign blame. She proposed a remedy, contending that greater government openness and transparency would have aided in the fight against the false information that spread following the attack. That's a new idea, isn't it? Genuinely informing people of what is happening rather than letting them piece it together from rumors and conjecture. Cooper's last point was to demand a comprehensive investigation of how the government handles information. The public is likely to find resonance in this demand since they are fed up with being fed, well, you know the rest, and kept in the dark. Following Cooper's spectacular performance in Parliament, the country is now dealing with the real consequences of government opacity. The potentially hazardous repercussions of keeping important information from the public have been exposed by the Shadow Home Secretary's unrelenting search for the truth. Her inquiries have sparked a flurry of discussion over transparency and public safety, in addition to revealing holes in the official story. The seriousness of Cooper's disclosures is highlighted by the need for an impartial investigation following the Southport tragedy. The public's increasing apprehension about whether the government's national security strategy is doing more harm than good is reflected in this call for accountability. One can't help but question, as the demand for answers intensifies, has the administration unintentionally increased the risk of the country in an attempt to defend it? Cooper's perseverance has surely resonated with a public that is desperate for its leaders to be honest. However, the government's continued blockade raises the question of whether this is the beginning of significant change or merely another phase in the long history of political misdirection.